Did the U.S. military just kidnap Nicolás Maduro?
U.S. President Donald Trump says the American military has captured President Nicolás Maduro and his wife.
Maduro said that he was kidnapped from his home in Caracas.
Kidnap is a loaded word because it implies illegality. Maybe a more neutral way of describing Maduro's capture is as an abduction. But the U.S. government calls it an arrest.
It's largely a law enforcement function. This was an arrest of 2 indicted fugitives of American justice.
And just to be clear, this isn't some nerdy question about semantics. It's a question about law and whether the U.S. has the legal right to extract world leaders from their homes, and maybe even whether other countries might have that right too. Let me explain. If there's something that feels off to you about one country unilaterally claiming the authority to waltz into another and then put their leader in cuffs, it's probably because your perspective is rooted in international law. Article 2, subsection 4 of the UN Charter is pretty clear. All members shall refrain from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. Okay, so the UN, whose membership includes both the United States and Venezuela, and virtually every country on Earth, it forbids its members from breaching each other's sovereignty by force, or even threatening to do so.
The consensus after the Second World War was that the way to prevent the Third World War was to ban completely the use of armed force among states to resolve their disputes.
At the Nuremberg trials after the Second World War, it was an American prosecutor, in fact, who argued that the crime of aggression, one country against another, was the supreme international crime, that to start an aggressive war has the moral qualities of the worst of crimes. Not to say that the US is starting a war here, or that even if it were, there aren't exceptions that allow it.
The only 2 circumstances would be the exercise of the right to self-defense. The second circumstance is where the Security Council has made a determination, for example, of the threat to international peace and collective security, or the existence of an act of aggression, or a threat to peace.
But here's the thing. The US most certainly did not have Venezuela's consent to abduct its leader. It also didn't have the permission of the UN Security Council. Self-defense? That's trickier.
In order to be able to exercise that, you have to be subject to an armed attack, and your use of force would have to be necessary and proportionate. But the United States, over the last 20 years, have put in place various attempts to expand the scope of self-defense.
Venezuela is not the conduit for the drugs coming to the United States. Venezuela accounts for about 5% of the cocaine trafficking trade, but the majority of that goes to Europe. So the justification for this as a kind of a self-defense war on drugs defense is non-existent or painfully thin.
The U.S. has argued Nicolás Maduro is the head of a narco-terrorism operation, and that the illicit drugs funneled through Venezuela amount to a
Weapon of mass destruction.
Weapon of mass destruction.
Weapon of mass destruction.
We're formally classifying fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction.
This could be the beginning of a self-defense argument, that the breach of Venezuela's borders, killing reportedly at least 40 people, and capturing Venezuela's president are merely parts of a preemptive strike to prevent the loss of American life. And maybe what fuels this defense is that Venezuelan troops reportedly shot back, which begins to touch on what is perhaps the most important legal argument, at least for the US, that the domestic legal rationale of self-defense and pursuing Maduro, even beyond international borders, trumps everything. Part of what makes the legality of Maduro's arrest so confusing is that we're really talking about 2 types of law. There's international law, and then there's US domestic law. It was very telling to hear Secretary of State Marco Rubio say this in an interview with ABC News.
Let me ask the question again. What is the legal authority for the United States to be running Venezuela?
Well, I explained to you what our goals are and how we're going to use the leverage to make it happen. As far as what our legal authority is on the quarantine, I'm very simple. We have court orders. These are sanctioned boats, and we get orders from courts to go after and seize these sanctions. So I don't know, is a court not a legal authority?
Put simply, U.S. law is what grants U.S. law enforcement the right to do what it does, which is to arrest people. And there is a years-long legal case that has been built up against Nicolás Maduro. As we can see in this brand new unsealed indictment, he's facing 4 counts: conspiracy charges related to narco-terrorism and the importation of cocaine to the United States, as well as 2 charges related to the possession of machine guns and destructive devices. The indictment accuses Maduro of having partnered with some of the most violent and prolific drug traffickers and narco-terrorists in the world, that he allows cocaine-fueled corruption to flourish for his own benefit, that he and his inner circle provided law enforcement cover and logistical support for the transport of cocaine through Venezuela, and that he and his wife ordered kidnappings, beatings, and murders against those who owed them drug money or otherwise undermined their drug trafficking operation. The U.S. government considers Maduro a fugitive of American justice. There's been a bounty for his capture, $25 million under the Biden administration, and then doubled to $50 million under Trump's. And there is precedent for the U.S. military helping to execute these kinds of arrests abroad.
Thousands of American troops are tonight holding key positions in Panama after launching an attack early this morning to oust the dictator General Noriega.
The U.S. invasion of Panama in 1989 had some similarities to what we're seeing in Venezuela. The dictator running the country at the time, General Manuel Noriega, he was under indictment in the U.S. for drug-related charges. Ultimately, he was brought to the U.S., tried and convicted, spent decades behind bars. And leading up to the U.S. invasion, which set this whole series of events in motion, this legal opinion from within the U.S. Justice Department on whether international law forbids the U.S. president from authorizing forcible abductions. The conclusion? We do not believe that it does, and that the text of Article 2, subsection 4 of the UN Charter does not prohibit extraterritorial law enforcement activities. So this isn't war, said the United States then, and may very well say now. It's just making an arrest. At the end of the day, what the Trump administration argues is that it is following its own set of rules, and that international law doesn't apply here. But even if it did, consider once more the case of General Noriega of Panama. After the U.S. invasion, the UN General Assembly voted 75-20 to condemn it as a flagrant violation of international law and the independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of states. A majority of the UN Security Council also voted to condemn it. But where did that resolution go? It was vetoed by the United States, which, as a permanent member, has that authority. So, thinking beyond this one operation in Venezuela,
we're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition.
The question really is, how much coercion is legal? And for those other world leaders watching and following Trump's example, what stops them from asking the same?